Myst, the Book of Donnie continues with Video 7 as read by the bathroom reader. I am covering for the Plurality Report, who thinks that ol' Incest Omar is the one who belongs in the dustbin of history. Atris dangled in the harness, his left hand steadying him against the rough surface of the cliff face as he leaned across and marked the trunk. Below him was 1,000 feet of tree and rock, an almost vertical drop with here and there a yawning chasm reaching deep into the shadowed interior of the plateau. Some 50 feet up from him, yet still some way from the summit, Karad and Eras also hung, Eras fixing the two broad straps about the trunk of the marked tree, while Karad began to saw through the base. Above them was a path of neatly cut stumps, reaching up to where Master Tamon was busily organizing the construction of the platform, using the trunks they had cut earlier. They had been at the task for 2 hours now, and already a skeletal structure jutted out over the edge, a skein of ropes securing it until a more permanent fixing could be made. Young Janaran was in charge of making and fitting the winch, while Catherine and Merim were busy organizing food and supplies for the expedition, a dozen backpacks laid out in a neat line at the back of the clearing. Atris turned, spinning expertly on the rope, stopping himself with the toe of his boot against the rock face. Looking up, he studied the channel they had cut through the trees and nodded to himself. He had chosen this route because of the slight overhang. Turning a natural obstacle to his advantage. It would have been almost impossible to climb down from the plateau, and certainly quite unfeasible to attempt to clamber back in case of an emergency. But when the chairlift was working, they could get up and down the cliff in minutes, and transport whatever equipment they needed, not to speak of its use in an emergency. But he would need to replace Eras and Karad soon. It would have been heavy work even on steady ground, and though they were still enthusiastic, he could see they were flagging, the slightly built Eras more than his sturdier cousin. He called up to them, keeping his voice low enough to carry, but not strong enough to be overheard from below. 2 more, then send replacements down. They did not argue, merely nodded, yet he could sense their disappointment. There was nothing they liked more than a challenge, and this, the scaling of this gargantuan cliff, was a challenge. Looking down again, Atris felt his astonishment return, renewed every time he looked. Below him the massive trees stood like vast pillars in some demented mountain hall, nightmarishly tilted to the vertical. At the foot of the plateau, glimpsed through the heavy foliage, was a huge rock, a great spur of dark ochre, its surface bare. Atris narrowed his eyes, staring through his lenses at it, then shook his head. It could not be helped. They would have to stop the chairlift some way above that before the tree cover gave way to barren rock, and run rope ladders down, because if anyone were watching... He tugged on the rope, once, twice, a third time. Slowly it was let out from above. Slowly he descended, using his feet to push himself out from the rock face. This tree, yes, and that. But what if they were watching us, he thought. What if they'd been watching us since we came through, waiting for us to come down? What if they're setting their ambush even now? It was not a fear he wished to share, but he had to face it. Whoever they were, the native people of this age might not readily welcome intruders, even ones as peaceful as themselves. Atris looked at his timer. From his estimates, they had another 6, maybe 7 hours of daylight. Time enough to finish the chairlift and make the descent. But he did not like the idea of going down there just as night fell. No, they would complete the chairlift and test it. Then they would secure it at the top of the plateau and spend the night up there. Maybe so, yet even he felt impatient at the thought. He wanted to explore this world more than any other he had ever seen, and he knew that all the others felt the same. He had seen for himself how their eyes kept going to all that wondrous landscape, awed, one might almost say stunned, by its beauty. They would descend tomorrow at dawn, unarmed, yet prepared, if necessary, to fight their way back to the cliff and back to Donnie. And the linking book? He would have Master Tamon rig something up to dispose of the book if an emergency arose. It was easily done, after all. From above came the sound of sawing, then a call. As Atris looked up, he saw another of the great trunks lift away and then sway its slow way up the cliff face toward the platform. Tomorrow, then, he thought, and turned facing outward once again, seeing the rich greenness of the land there just beyond the branches, below him and to either side. Tomorrow. That evening they camped in the clearing. The day had been long and hard, but no one wanted to retire, and after supper they gathered on the platform, sitting there long into the night, staring silently out into the sable darkness, upon which was scattered 1,000 tiny patches of glowing pearl, like stars upon the night's dark ocean. "What do you think?" Eras asked finally. "I think I could sit here forever," Merim answered him, and there was a murmur of laughter at that. "Maybe so," Atris said, standing and stretching. "Yet we should get some rest now." 5 minutes, Merim pleaded, then pointing, added, "Look, the moon is rising." And, true enough, a single small blue-white moon was just visible above the distant horizon, the smallest of the three that this age apparently possessed. Atris turned, looking across the vast pearled darkness at that thumbnail of growing light, entranced by the sight, then nodded. "All right. 5 minutes, then." Dawn found them standing at the foot of the plateau, in deep shadow, the great spur of ochre rock beneath their feet. A pleasant wood lay below them, on the far side of which was a watercourse, but Atris did not mean to travel that way just yet. First he wanted to send out scouts to see what could be learned about the land and its inhabitants. For this task he chose Eras and Generon. He had them set their timers, then promised to be back within the half hour. They returned with just under 2 minutes to spare, perspiring heavily. The land, it seemed, was prosperous, and there were signs of recent activity, but they had seen not a single person. Cautious as ever, Atris sent out Karad and Isel to make another sweep of the land, but when they returned half an hour later, it was only to confirm what Eras and Generon had reported. The land was beautiful, but empty. Taking Catherine aside, Atris debated the matter a moment, then addressed the rest of them once more. "If my estimates are correct, the nearest of the dwellings we saw from the plateau is a 2-hour walk from here. We'll make for that, sending out scouts along the way. We have ample food and water, so our only problem will be one of secrecy. If you must talk, speak to an ear, otherwise remain silent, and keep to the trees, but don't bunch. Keep in a line behind me." He paused, then added, "Generon, I have a special task for you. You will be our anchor here at the foot of the plateau. From time to time I shall send a messenger back to report on what we have found. I need you to relay those messages back to Donnie through Master Tamon." Atris turned back. "Now, let us be on our way. But remember, though the land looks peaceful, we do not know the nature or customs of these people, so take care at all times." And with that, Atris turned, leading the way down off the rock and onto the plain below. An hour's walking brought them to the middle of an orchard of low trees with dark red trunks whose verdant branches bore a strange purple fruit. There they rested, seated on the rich green grass that lay like a carpet between the smooth boles of the trees. The day was hot, but it was cool enough beneath the branches. If Atris was right, The great house they had seen from the plateau lay directly ahead, but as yet they had had no sight of it. Atris sat there now, his measuring instruments open on the grass beside him as he wrote in his notebook. Mariam closed her eyes and rested back on her elbows, her legs stretched out. For a time she drifted, thoughtless, her head filled with the hum of the local insects. Earlier she had caught and studied one of them, a large bee-like insect, its fur bright red with a spiraling black stripe about the abdomen, and found that it lacked a sting. But so it was here. The beauty of it, combined with the warmth of the day, washed over her like the waves of a warm ocean on a summer's day. Oma, who had wandered away for a moment, returned to the clearing, gazing about distractedly, one of the dark, perfectly spherical fruits in his hand. Seeing Atris, he looked across and smiled. "Oma!" Atris bellowed. "What in the Maker's name are you doing?" Oma blinked, then stared at the partially eaten fruit in his hand, and, horrified, dropped it as if it were a burning coal. I'm sorry, he swallowed. I forgot, Master Atris." "Forgot!" Atris leaned toward him. "If you're sick, you look after yourself. You understand?" "But, Master Atris..." Atris turned his back. "All right," he said. "We'd better press on. Eras, scout ahead." As Eras hurried away, they rose silently and, slipping on their packs, made their way slowly after Atris, spread out like shadows beneath the trees. They had not gone far when Eras returned. "There's a path," he said. "It runs straight." "Toward the house?" Atris asked. Eras shook his head. "It crosses our way." "All right, let's go and see." It was a broad, well-tended path of loosely chipped white stone, raised up just above the level of the ground to either side. Small culverts containing the narrow irrigation channels that were everywhere in this land ran beneath it at regular intervals, while on its far side was a great field of tall exotic-looking plants with flame-tipped flowers, and beyond that a tree-capped ridge, its foliage dense and dark. As for the path itself, just as Eras had said, it ran straight to left and right. Yet the house, if Atris's calculations were correct, lay directly ahead. "Maybe it curves," Esel suggested. "It doesn't look as though it curves," Eras answered him. "No," Atris agreed. "Yet maybe we should follow it a while. Perhaps it meets another path farther along." Karad made to climb up onto the path, but Atris called him back. "No, Karad. We keep to the trees." Chastened, Karad did as he was told. Turning to the right, they began to walk. At first they were silent, but after a while, reassured by the peacefulness of the day, the beauty of the land through which they moved, Atris began to talk. "It makes you wonder," he said, pausing to turn and look about him. Catherine came alongside him. "Wonder what?" "What kind of people they are who tend this land." "A generous people," she said, without hesitation. Atris looked to her. The rest of the party had stopped and were looking about them at the surrounding fields, fanning themselves in the afternoon heat. "You think so?" "I do. Just look at how rich this land is. There's so much here. They can afford to be generous." Atris smiled, but Catherine went on. "Where there's little to go round, each man and woman must fight for their share. But when there's so much..." "It isn't always so," Atris said. "When I lived with my grandmother, we had little or nothing, yet I would not say we were ungenerous." Catherine laughed. "That's different. What if there had been 3 or 4 families living in the cleft, each needing to rake a living from the little that was there? What then?" "Maybe," he said without any real conviction, "but I feel you're right." They walked on, lost in the day's beauty, each with their own thoughts about the wonders that lay on every side. Half a mile farther on, the path gently climbed, crossing a small, delicately anchored bridge. Beneath its single span flowed a stream, a broad blue channel that meandered gently through the fields to their right, finally losing itself among the trees far to the left. Indeed, they were so taken by their surroundings that it was a moment or two before anyone saw the boat that was moored on the far side of the bridge. "Atris," Oma hissed, "look!" The boat was long and broad, its prow elegantly curved, a great awning of yellow silk overhanging the deck, below which rested a number of elegant-looking couches. Beneath that awning, one hand resting lightly on the supporting pole, stood a tall young man dressed in a flowing robe of lavender edged with black. His hair was midnight black and cut in a strange yet elegant fashion, and his eyes were a deep sea green. But the strangest thing about all of him was that, though he looked directly at them, he seemed not to have seen them at all. "Do I see you?" Atris stopped dead. The words, spoken in a clear, yet heavily accented Dani, had come from the stranger, yet still the man did not seem to look at them. Was he blind? Merim wondered, seeing the lack of movement in those eyes, or were those green eyes lenses of some kind? Atris took another step toward him. "Where are we?" The young man did not seem to hear him. "Do I see you?" he repeated. Atris turned, looking to the others, puzzled by the young man's behavior, then turned back, stepping closer, stopping no more than 4 or 5 paces from where the young man stood in the boat. "We are from Dani," Atris said, speaking slowly and precise. "We have come from Dani." There was a movement in the young man's eyes, a movement that wasn't quite a movement, but more a reassessment. A look of understanding slowly entered those orbs that, until a moment before, had seemed sightless. "From Dani." Atris hesitated, then nodded. "Then come," he said, the Dani words clear despite the strange accent. "You must be hungry after your long journey." The young man looked about him, taking each of them in one at a time, his eyes resting slightly longer on the figure of Merim, the eyes narrowing slightly as he noted her boyish hair. Then, putting out both hands to Atris, he introduced himself. "Forgive me. My name is Hadre Rojethe, son of Jethe Rojethe. Welcome to Terra Ni." The boat moved slowly, silently down the stream, its smooth passage within the channel unaided by oar or motor, such that the Dani, seated aboard the strange craft, looked about them in wonder. Wherever they looked, their eyes found delights, as if this whole land had been sculpted, each plant and bush arranged just so to please the eye. The shape of the land, its textures and colorings, each element blended perfectly, with now and then a contrast, be it a brightly colored flower or a specially shaped rock, that would cause them to smile with sheer pleasure. As for their host, though he was genial enough, he was not greatly forthcoming. Whenever Atris asked a direct question, Hadre would answer vaguely, or change the subject, or even act as if Atris had not spoken, and this, like his behavior in those first few moments they had met, puzzled Atris. And yet there seemed no darker reason for it. From what Hadre did say, it seemed they were to stay at the great house that evening. Moreover, the young man made it quite clear that they were very welcome, and that if there was anything they wanted, anything, they were only to ask and he would see to it. They sat back, lounging against the broad, ornately decorated gunwales of the boat, entranced by their surroundings. As the boat came around a turn in the stream and, passing beneath a decorative arch, glided into a sunlit glade, a small bowl in the surrounding hills. Atris was surprised to find a picnic set up for them. They climbed from the boat, amazed. A dozen couches were set up within that pleasant space, and at the center of it all a great table was piled high with food, all manner of fruits and other delicacies, that, when they finally tasted them, proved delicious beyond all belief. Oma, who had sustained no harm from his earlier forgetfulness, now turned to their host and smiled. "This is most excellent." Hadre smiled. "I am glad you like it, Master Oma," he said, impressing them all, for Oma had been named but once on the journey, and then only in passing. But that was not the only instance. Hadre had only to be told something once, and he remembered it. When they had eaten their fill, Hadre ushered them back onto the boat, and they continued their journey. Once more the land opened up about them as they glided silently through an endless vista of wonders. As they came around one bend, they were confronted by a great waterfall of tiny blue flowers, beneath which they passed, finding themselves a moment later within a cavernous space, the roof of which was formed by the roots of a single massive tree. And on they went, past sculpted banks of wonderfully scented blooms, and out into a valley where, directly ahead of them, the great house rose like a glacier from the mound on which it sat. "The Maker's name," Atreus said under his breath, not merely because the building was far bigger than he had guessed at from a distance, but because he saw now what they all suddenly saw, that what they had taken to be simple whiteness was not in fact white at all, but a whole rainbow of colors within the stone, as if the whole building were one great prism. Yet the stone was not transparent. The different colors in the stone seemed to shift with every movement, as if alive. Closer they came, and closer still, and then, with a strange little rush, the channel turned, taking them through a long, low archway and beneath the walls of the building into a huge, shadowed courtyard of startlingly blue marble, about which level after level of balconies looked down, great clusters of gorgeously scented blooms, bright gold and startling crimson, jet black and emerald, trailing from them. 6 massive stone ramps led up from the courtyard, each entering the house through a beautifully carved wooden gateway, beyond which were huge double doors inlaid with pearl. "Home," Hadre said simply. Then, stepping from the boat, he turned and bowed graciously. "Welcome, Atreus and Catherine. Welcome all. Welcome to the house of Rogete." Atreus stepped through the great entrance arch and into a hall of cool marble, at the center of which was a round pool. A circle of slender pillars surrounded it, each a distinct color, the stone sculpted to resemble the stems of flowers, each pillar blossoming where it met the ceiling, the giant petals folding outward, so that the ceiling seemed like a huge floral bed, the interplay of color delightful to the eye. Atreus stared up at it a moment, then looked to his young host. "Is all of this great building yours, Hadre Rogete?" Hadre turned, smiling pleasantly. "It is my father's house, and all the land surrounding it are his." They walked on until they stood beside the pool, looking down into its crystal depths. The pillars to either side of them soared up into the ceiling, 50, maybe 60 feet above their heads, dwarfing them. From this close, the stone, which from the doorway had seemed frail, now looked thoroughly solid and immovable. Thus far, Hadre had been the only person they had seen in all of Torani, but now 2 other men, smaller and more stockily built, discernibly different from Hadre, and not merely in their physical attributes, entered the hall from a narrow doorway to the left, and, hastening across, bowed low before Hadre. They wore long, flowing cloaks of a soft wine-red cloth, but what was most distinct about them was their silver hair. Not white, but silver, like a fine wire, which was swept back off their foreheads and tied into a tight bunch at their necks. "Master?" the elder of them asked. As he turned, Atreus noticed he had 2 vertical purple stripes beneath his right ear. "Karu, Jad," Hadre said, "these are my guests. You will take great care of them and see to all their needs." "Master," the 2 men said as one, then stepped back, seeming almost to vanish as they slipped into the shadows beside the pillars. Hadre turned back to his guests and smiled. "And now you will forgive me, Atreus, but I must tell my father the news. He will want to greet you personally." After Hadre had gone, the two servants led Atris and his party through into a second smaller hall, where once again a meal had been laid out ready for them. As in the clearing in the wood, a number of couches had been placed in a circle about the center of the room, within easy reach of the endless delicacies that graced the central table. Having seen that they were comfortable, Carew and Jod stepped back, seeming to blend once more into the shadows of the walls. This second hall was both more modest in its scale and more opulent in its detail than the previous one. Merim, looking about her, could not help but admire the care these people took. Each bowl, each spoon, each tiny fork was a work of art, not to speak of the arms of the couches or the carved panels that filled each wall between the swirling marble pillars. Not a surface was overlooked. Even the simplest thing was decorated, yet the overall impression was not overly decorative. There was an underlying simplicity that formed a perfect contrast with the intricate designs. Nothing was out of place here, nothing overwrought. Looking across, Merim saw how Atris stared at the myriad of things surrounding him, looking from one to another with the same odd look, and knew at once that he, too, had seen what she had seen. Yet, when he looked up, there was a strange, almost wistful smile on his face. Seeing it, Catherine, who had also been watching him, asked, "Atris, what is it?" Atris picked up one of the delicate spoons, tracing the molded pattern on its bowl with his thumb, then laughed, a strange, brief, haunted laugh. "All this," he said finally, "it reminds me." "Of Anna?" Atris nodded. "There was never a surface she would leave alone. It was as though the whole universe was a blank page on which she was compelled to write." He paused, then, "I sense it is the same for these people. I look around and see the same blend of simplicity and embellishment." "They must be great dreamers," Catherine said. "Yes, and fine craftsmen too," Isel added, looking up from the beautifully glazed bowl he was holding. Merim nodded, then reached out to take the cool drink so close to hand, sipping at the blood-red liquid delicately. Like the drink she had had in the clearing, this was both refreshing and intoxicating, though not in the way that wine was intoxicating. There was such a scent to this, such an overwhelming taste, that it was as if her senses had been numbed until the moment she had tasted it. "This Hadre and his father," Iras said, "they must be very rich men to own all this. They surely cannot all live like this."
"On the contrary," a voice boomed from the far side of the chamber, "ours is but a humble estate."
At once they were all on their feet, facing the newcomer, a handsome, elderly-looking man with neat dark hair and a stern, patrician air. Yet, even as that sternness registered on the mind, the old man smiled and, opening his arms, walked across and embraced Atris warmly.
"Atris, friends and companions of Atris, I am Jete Rojete, and you are welcome to my house. Stay as long as you will. My home is your home."
And with this little speech complete, he walked among them, taking hands or embracing them, coming to Merim last.
"Young lady,"
he said, with a slight bow of his head, as if he spoke to someone high above him in status,
"I am indeed most pleased to make your acquaintance."
Merim, both delighted and embarrassed by the sudden attention, ducked her head down, feeling a faint flush come to her neck. And then it was Atris's turn to thank Hadre's father for his hospitality.
"Think nothing of it,"
Rojete said, with a lazy gesture of dismissal.
"I am sure you would do the same were we the visitors and you the hosts."
Atris smiled. "Indeed we would." The old man's smile encompassed them all.
"Well then, so it is."
Then, turning to Iras,
"But forgive me my rudeness, Master Iras. You asked a question, and I gave you but a partial answer. Come then, let us be seated once more, and I shall answer all of your questions."
It was late afternoon when finally Jete Rojete clapped his hands and stood.
"Carew, Show my guests to their rooms.
At once his servant was at his back, waiting to do his bidding. Turning to Atris, Rogete smiled.
You have traveled far, my friends. I am sure you will wish to bathe and change your clothes before tonight's entertainment.
Entertainment? Atris sat forward. It was the first time Rogete had mentioned it.
Oh, it's nothing much. A simple thing. A few friends, local landowners, will be invited. And my sons, of course. It will be a chance for you to meet everyone.
Atris smiled. We thank you, Rogete, for your kindness.
Not at all,
the old man said, looking about him and smiling.
I am glad you are here, Atris, you and all your party. And remember, whatever you want, you have only to ask.
The two men bowed to one another, then Rogete turned and swept from the room, his son hurrying to catch him up. The bedroom, like all else, was massive. A huge bed, big enough, it seemed, to sleep a small village, rested in the center of a huge, high-ceilinged room. Here the pillars were thick, 8-sided things of a midnight basalt. 8 of them formed an octagon about the center of that long and airy chamber, thrusting up out of the floor that was made of wood, the broad slats of which were coated with a fine dark red lacquer, inset with all manner of ingenious patterns. The partition doors were huge, paneled things, and set into walls so thick they reminded Atris of a fortress he had visited once on an ancient Donny age. Most impressive of all, however, was the wide balcony that led off of the room, and gave a perfect view of the surrounding countryside. A fine silk hanging of pale lemon and blue shimmered in the late afternoon breeze as Catherine stepped beneath it and out onto the stone flags of the balcony. Atris. He stepped through, joining her there at the balustrade, the two of them silent a moment as they stared out across the sloping lawns toward a copse of trees. No tree the same, the combination of colorings and textures a delight to the eye. A strange bird called, high and sweet. Threading her arm through his, Catherine smiled up at him. Have you ever dreamt of such a place, Atris?
No, he said. My mind reels before it, Catherine. To think that it is all like this.
For Rogete had told them that, far from being a rich man, he was but a common citizen, and that there were many, the governor of the district among them, who lived in a far more palatial manner, though how that could be, Atris could not imagine. For this was luxury beyond anything he had ever experienced. Moreover, Rogete himself had proved an intelligent and witty man, immensely cultured, quick to understand, and always generous in his comments. Atris had warmed to him at once. Even so, it was hard to take in much of Rogete said, and had Atris not already had that glimpse of the land from the plateau, he might have counted it as boastful. Was this place really as big as Rogete claimed? 200 million citizens. It was difficult to imagine, even though he had seen how the land stretched away from the horizon to horizon. Why, if they all lived like this, then the wealth of this land must be truly phenomenal. Donny, even at its height, was nothing beside it. While they bathed and changed, Atris and Catherine talked further of what they had learned from Rogete. Tirani was ruled by a king, supported by a council of advisors, under which were the district governors. Yet, astonishingly enough, despite the size of the kingdom, there was no equivalent of the guild of maintainers. No one policed Tirani because no one needed to. It was that, more than anything else, that they had seen or heard that most impressed Atris, for to him it revealed the high moral standard this culture had attained. This was a land without wars, or theft, or fraud. All this, Atris said, gesturing at the mosaics, the statuary, and all the other innumerable beautiful things that surrounded them. All of this is quite remarkable, yet without a moral depth it is nothing. The true defining mark of a civilization is how its people treat another. They have servants, Catherine began.
Yes, but they clearly treat them well, as I'm sure you've noticed. Carew and Jod might bow their heads before their masters, yet there is nothing servile about them. Indeed, I sense an air of great pride about them.
Do you not find that strange, Atris?
In a land such as this? No. Some must work while others plan and organize the work. So it is in all societies. So it was to a degree in Donny.
To a degree, but Catherine left it there. Besides, she was not really in disagreement with Atris. To keep a world this beautiful must take a great deal of organizing, and Atris was right. She had never before met with such servants. Changing tack, she asked another question that had been playing on her mind. Atris, do you think they are your kin?
Donny, you mean?
Yes, there is the common language after all.
That might have been acquired or shared maybe back in the distant past. It's possible this was an age that, losing its connection with Donny, went its own way.
Do you think so?
I'd say it was highly likely. For one, they do not share the visual weakness of the Donny. As far as I've seen, they wear no lenses, and the style in which they build, it is as different from the Donny as it could possibly be. Their extensive use of wood, for instance.
True, Catherine said, but that can easily be explained. In Donny they had no trees. Here there are millions of them, thousands of millions. Besides, over millennia, societies take different paths. We should expect such differences.
Maybe so,
Atris said, pulling on a silken jacket that had been left out on the bed for him.
But until I know for certain that there is a link, I will not assume one. The fact that they speak a version of our language proves nothing.
Catherine was about to pursue the subject when there was a knocking on the door.
Come,
Atris said, turning to face the doorway, but it was only Marim, Eras, and Karat. They spilled into the room, all smiles and excitement.
Master Atris, Eras said, there's a library.
It's huge,
Karat added as they left the room and hurried down a long, broad corridor, the ceiling of which seemed like the bottom of a well, it was so far above them.
And the books, Marim added. You've never seen anything like it.
Atris smiled at the last, yet when he stepped into the deeply recessed doorway, he stopped dead, astonished. The library was not a single room as he expected. Indeed, it was not a room at all, but a great hall, with, just beyond it, a second and even a third hall, the walls of which were filled, floor to high ceiling, with books. Endless leather-bound books, enough, it seemed, to fill Donny. And these are simple landowners? Catherine said, voicing his own thought. Atris? Atris turned, surprised, to find Hadre there behind him in the doorway.
Forgive us, Hadre. We did not mean to pry.
There was nothing to forgive,
Hadre said, smiling and gesturing that they should go through into the library.
Whatever you wish to see. As my father said, our home is yours while you stay with us.
You are both most generous.
Not at all, Hadre said.
My people love to share things of the mind. We are great lovers of books, as I sense you are.
He clapped his hands, and at once a servant appeared in the doorway to their right. It was not Carew or Jod, but this time a much older man. Even so, he wore a similar wine-red cloth, and had the same silver hair, the same striped markings beneath his right ear.
Master? You will not be needed, Dura. I will see to my guests myself. As you wish, master.
And with a bow, Dura departed.
So,
Hadre looking to Atris, smiling once more.
Where would you like to start, Atris?